Hi, my name is Dakota Aller, and this is my author study over Beatrix Potter. Beatrix Potter's full name was Helen Beatrix Potter. She was born on July 28th in 1866 in South Kensington, London. She was born and raised in London, but she spent long summers vacationing with her family in Scotland. A lot of her paintings and writing influences came from these vacations. Beatrix was raised very wealthy. She was an heir to a large cotton fortune, and in those days, um, the wealthy children were educated at home with professionals who were brought in to teach them. Um, so she didn't really get out a lot when she was younger. Um, in one of her vacations in Scotland, she had illustrated a short little, actually, note for a sick girl, and someone got a hold of it, and that's actually where the tale of Peter Rabbit came from. It was published in 1902 by Frederick Warne and Company. The same publishing company ended up publishing over 23 of her tales and various more stories. In 1905, she was engaged to the son of her publishing company, Norman Warne, but he passed away shortly after they got engaged. And after the death of her fiance, she bought a property called Hilltop Farm, which is actually the setting for the books and movies Peter Rabbit. But she spent a lot of time there in isolation, painting and writing her stories after Norman Warne passed away. After he passed away, in 1909, she bought the neighboring property called Castle Cottage, and she married a man named William Heelis, and in 1913 they moved into the Castle Cottage. Pretty much all of Beatrix's stories are about animals with human characteristics. They all speak and wear some sort of human clothing. Most of the time they walk upright, and a lot of these were based on actual animals that she either had as pets or that would inhabit her land in at Castle Lodge or Hilltop Farm. So most of these were based off of real animals. Obviously, she gave them personalities, but and she was a big painter. She loved painting nature and obviously animals. She actually got some contract work painting funguses, mushrooms, and stuff for a company for a while. But besides writing and illustrating, she was very big into nature. When she passed away, she left all of her property to a trust so that it could be used to keep the rural surroundings natural habitat, so no one could build on them. And she actually bought a large sheep farm that was really drugged down and had a lot of sick sheep, and brought that back to health. And she actually won a lot of awards and prizes for her work as a humanitarian and for helping the wildlife. The book I'm going to read is The Tale of Peter Rabbit by Beatrix Potter. Once upon a time, there were 4 little rabbits, and their names were Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. They lived with their mother in a sandbank underneath the root of a very big fir tree. "Now, my dear," said old Miss Rabbit one morning, "you may go into the fields or down the lane, but do not go into Mr. McGregor's gardens. Your father had an accident there. He was put into a pie by Mrs. McGregor. Now run along and don't get into mischief. I'm going out." Then old Miss Rabbit took a basket and her umbrella and went through the wood to the baker's. She bought a loaf of brown bread and 5 currant buns. Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail, who were good little bunnies, went down to the lane to gather blackberries. But Peter, who was very naughty, ran straight away to Mr. McGregor's garden and squeezed under the gate. First he ate some lettuce and some French beans, then he ate some radishes, then feeling rather sick, he went to look for some parsley. But round the end of the cucumber frame, whom should he meet but Mr. McGregor? Mr. McGregor was on his hands and knees planting young cabbages, but he jumped up and ran after Peter, waving a rake and calling, "Stop, thief!" Peter was most dreadfully frightened. He rushed all over the garden, for he had forgotten the way back to the gate. He lost his shoes among the cabbages and the other shoe among the potatoes. After losing his shoes, he ran on 4 legs and went faster. He might have gotten away altogether if he had not unfortunately ran into a gooseberry net and got caught by the large buttons on his jacket. It was a blue jacket with brass buttons, quite new. Peter gave himself up for lost and shed big tears, but his sobs were overheard by some friendly sparrows who flew to him in great excitement and begged him to try to free himself. Mr. McGregor came up with the sieve, which he intended to pop upon Peter, but Peter wriggled out just in time, leaving his jacket behind him. Peter rushed into the tool shed and jumped into a can. It would have been a beautiful thing to hide in if it had not so much water in it. Mr. McGregor was quite sure that Peter was somewhere in the tool shed, perhaps hidden underneath a flower pot. He began to turn them over carefully, looking under each. Presently Peter sneezed. "Kerchoo!" Mr. McGregor was after him in no time. He tried to put his foot upon Peter, who jumped out of a window, upsetting 3 plants. The window was too small for Mr. McGregor. He was tired of running after Peter and went back to his work. Peter sat down to rest. He was out of breath and trembling with fright. He had not the least idea which way to go, and he was also very damp from sitting in that can. After a time he began to wander about, going lippity-lippity, not very fast, and looking all around. He found a door in a wall, but it was locked. There was no room for a fat little rabbit to squeeze underneath. An old mouse was running in and out over the stone doorstep, carrying peas and beans to her family in the wood. Peter asked her the way to the gate, but she had a large pea in her mouth, so she could not answer. Peter began to cry. Then he tried to find his way straight across the garden, but he became more and more puzzled. Soon he came to a pond. A white cat was staring at some goldfish. She sat very still. Peter thought it was best to go away. He had heard about cats from his cousin, Benjamin Bunny. Peter went back towards the tool shed. Suddenly, quite close to him, he heard the noise of a hoe. Scritch, scratch, scratch, scritch. Peter scurried underneath the bushes, but soon as nothing happened, he came out, climbed upon a wheelbarrow, and peeped over. The first thing he saw was Mr. McGregor, hoeing onions. His back was turned to Peter, and beyond him was the gate. Peter got down very quietly off the wheelbarrow and started running as fast as he could along the straight walk behind some black currant bushes. Mr. McGregor caught sight of him at the corner, but Peter did not care. He slipped underneath the gate and was safe at last in the wood outside the garden. But Mr. McGregor hung the little blue jacket and the shoes for a scarecrow to frighten away the blackbirds. Peter never stopped running or looked behind him till he got home to the big fir tree. He was so tired that he flopped down upon the nice soft sand on the floor of the rabbit hole and shut his eyes. His mother was busy cooking. She wondered what he had done with his clothes. It was the second little jacket and pair of shoes that Peter had lost in a fortnight. I am so sorry to say that Peter was not very well during the evening. His mother put him into bed and made some chamomile tea. She gave a dose of it to Peter, 1 tablespoonful to be taken at bedtime. But Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail had bread, milk, and blackberries for supper. The end. A couple more of her works were The Tale of Squirrel Nutkin, The Tale of Two Bad Mice, The Tale of Miss Tiggly Wiggly, The Tale of Mr. Jeremy Fisher, The Tale of Flopsy Bunnies, The Tale of Mr. Todd, and Appley Dapply's nursery rhymes. She had a lot more, but those are some of the more well-known ones. The first activity I would like to do with the children after reading The Tale of Peter Rabbit would be a cause and effect board. I would write a cause that a character did, mainly Peter, and have the students tell me the effect it had. And I believe this is a good way for children to learn causes and effects, that every action has a reaction. And the second activity I like to do with the class is a science experiment based on the story. I would get 2 plastic cups filled with potting soil and plant seeds in them. They would be taken care of exactly the same. The only difference is one would be in sunlight and the other would be kept in the dark. I would have the students guess how they would grow differently, and as we monitored their growth, we would do like just a real small, simple introduction to photosynthesis. Thank you.